mean, you saw Nolan coming up from the start. Do you remember a moment where it really started to turn for him? I know it happened pretty quickly, but where you saw something and said, oh, this guy has a chance to be pretty special.
Yeah, I think we knew it early on. We knew when we drafted him, there were scouts, there were front office people that were a part of that talked about the makeup immediately, and as soon as he got in, you felt it, you saw it, and then you saw his ability to spin the baseball, and then it was just a matter of harnessing the skill, and he kept diversifying the arsenal. I think it really jumped off the page at me in Double-A. He was going through one of his rougher stretches at that point in time. I think he went 10 games and didn't win a game in Double-A. And we were talking about his sweeper one day about, he wasn't able to get it under the barrel of lefties, and just talked about just go compete and shape a pitch that gets under the barrel. And then he got in the pen with A.J. Sager, and then he threw his curveball just because we talked about getting underneath a barrel. And like that just level of athleticism to make an adjustment to add a pitch, to get in that pen with A.J. and to do that quickly and to develop when harnessed, one of the more devastating pitches in all of baseball. It's just pretty special what he can do, and I think we have always loved just the way he goes about his business every single day. It's obvious he expects to win when he steps on the mound.
You mentioned his ability to add a pitch. I mean, when you guys drafted him, he had 2 pitches. Have you seen anyone that has been able to expand an arsenal like that quickly?
Not to that level. When you start spinning the ball over 3,000 RPMs, it's hard to command. His ability to spin a sweeper in the strike zone is very unique. So no, he's been pretty special that way. Ton of credit to Eric Jagers and the pitching development group for what they did with him. And then it's just let's add a cutter because he can. And then the curveball came out of nowhere. And so throwing 2 fastballs, it's a fun mix.
What is the key for him to cut down on some of those pitches that are just ball out of hand, those types?
Yeah, I think it continues to be just more familiarity with pitching. This was a 2-way guy just a little over a year ago. The more reps he gets, the more wild misses I think the less wild misses he has. And I do think that anytime you spin the baseball like that, those guys have, it just takes a little bit to get it off more than the rest of us that are throwing the ball in a much more tame fashion. It's not doing nearly as much.
We didn't get a chance to ask you about Robert yesterday with his rehab. Just what would you see that rehab plan being for him?
Yeah, he's going to play today, and him and Polanco are both in the lineup, and I think ultimately what happens today dictates what the next step is, and we're just excited to get him on a baseball field today.
I mean, he hasn't played since late April. I mean, same kind of situation as Polanco. Ideally, is there a number of at-bats you'd like to get these guys down there?
I think anytime you put a number on that, you end up defying that number. You either end up giving them more because it doesn't look the way it's supposed to, or they don't feel the way it's supposed to, or it happens really fast. There's no set number that we start with and try to get to. We want to just make sure they're recovering well and they feel well every day.
Obviously, this has been a tough season for you guys. When you look at the first-year guys like Nolan, Carson, AJ, how do you make sure that they're not adversely affected by just kind of the atmosphere, even just the difficulties of losing as much as you guys are?
Yeah, I think they have been incredibly resilient in their life. That's who they are as people. They have shown up every single day doing exactly what we would want them to do in preparation. I can't look at this adversely impacting them. I can understand where somebody might think that. These guys have shown up to play baseball every single day, and I think you've seen that if you've watched them on the field, and I think we're encouraged by the way they've handled that. It is harder in that set of circumstances for sure, but have not seen any yielding in them whatsoever. They're learning, they're growing, they're being challenged, and they're handling it well.
When it comes to cleaning up some of the defensive things this season, how do you guys realistically do that during the season? You put in the work every day, but how much time does it really allow for teaching or anything like that? How do you guys go about trying to clean this up in season?
Yeah, sometimes there's individual work that goes on. Sometimes it happens before cameras show up. Probably hard to believe that cameras aren't already there, but some guys get individual attention on a daily basis. They put that type of work in. And frankly, it goes back to a little bit of what I said in the initial conversation I had with you all in that press conference, which is just trusting yourself and being on a baseball field and just competing, because these guys are all very talented defenders and very talented baseball players, and I think them just trusting themselves and turning themselves loose make far less mistakes.
What do you think of me for this lineup when you get Robert and Polanco back? What kind of potential does that give you?
Yeah, I mean, in Robert's case, like it's a right-handed bat that we've like missed pretty obviously against left-handed pitching. It would be great to have Polo like really rounds out a lineup with an ability to hit from both sides. So the lineup gets lengthened. I think some of the at-bats that we've had late in games, like when you have those guys, like you have more options even if they're on the bench on a given day. You've got more choices that work really well, and I think it's just a longer, more diverse lineup.
I know it's getting ahead of yourself, but when Robert comes back, is there any sense that AJ might move on the dirt at all?
Yeah, AJ right now is like locked in out there in center. From a rep perspective, we have continued to get him some ground balls throughout the last few weeks. Most of that stuff is done outside of cameras. It's always been something that we wanted him to be able to do, but you're talking about somebody that's adjusting to the big leagues, and just being locked in out in center field right now is where he's been.
No plan for Holmes.
He is, I believe, going to throw a pin in a couple of days, and he is progressing well. Love to say he's ahead of schedule. I don't want to get ahead of myself and actually make that declaration, but like it's going well, and we're encouraged by that. And so he should get on the mound here in a couple of days, and we'll figure out what the next step is after that.
Is that his first time on the mound?
I should be able to answer that, and I can't.
We saw Bo spend, I think, just an inning at second base. Do you expect him to get any starts over there?
At this point in time, that's not in the cards. We'll say, like, he's really saved us with his ability to play multiple positions in different circumstances, and his willingness to. It's not always the state of mind of players that have done what he's done in the game to just bounce around freely as the team needs it. So it's been an asset for us that he's been, like, willing to help in any way possible, and will go anywhere.
Once Holmes gets on the mound, is that like a full spring training build-up, basically, from that point?
Obviously, we got to build out the pitch count. There's different points where you can bring a pitcher back where it adds value, especially around off days. But I don't have a specific timeline or a pitch count we got to get him to before he's viable.